Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dram-Antic Society tasting. This evening I'm going to do a tasting called Reek Peat 2026. I used to do tastings with my brother, and on New Year's evening we would do a Reek Peat tasting where we would have some peated whisky from different regions of Scotland and see what the different types of peat, the effect the different types of peat had and the different levels of peating had on the whiskies. And I thought I'd do one here this evening. So I've got five peated whiskies. Cadenhead Authentic Collection Ardmore 14-year-old at 56.5% from a bourbon barrel representing that sort of divide between Highland and Speyside. I think Ardmore is considered a Highland distillery. It's in the Eastern Highlands of Scotland. Then we've got a Highland Park, Whiskyland from Decadent Drams. Whiskyland Chapter 16 Highland Park 20-year-old at 55.5%. And then we're going over to the Isle of Skye to the new distillery there, and we've got a Living Souls Torabhaigh 7-year-old at 51.5%. And then we have from Glenmore, we have a rare find Islay 11-year-old mid-peated cask number 65 at 55.8%, which is almost certainly a Bowmore. And then we have an unnamed Islay. It's a Duncan Taylor, the Octave, an Islay 2008 16-year-old cask number 118444946 at 53.7%, which debate seems to suggest is either most likely a Coolila or possibly a Lagavulin. So, peat. What is peat? Well, Caithness, where I dwell, has quite a lot of peat, and we live quite close to the flow country, which sort of borders Caithness and Sutherland. At its core, peat is a plant mulch that's been compressed beneath boglands into a thick turf, which can be dug up, dried, and cut into brick-like segments. And traditionally, it was used similarly to coal as an organic source of fuel for hearths and homes. And if you go into any croft house in Caithness, they'll be burning peat at this time of year, especially with the snow we've had in the last few days. And it's a lovely smell, hence the reek of peat. Peat bogs are particularly prevalent across the UK and Ireland, with more than 23% of Scotland covered in this marshy phenomena. Hence, it's a prominent characteristic in many whiskies of these regions. But peat as a flavour was an accidental byproduct of the traditional whisky making process. Peat was burned in a kiln beneath the malting floors to dry out the barley in preparation for fermentation. And because of the thick smoke produced by the peat fires, the husks of the germinated barley would absorb the peat into the husk, giving the resulting grains a smoky flavour. With the invention of more economical heating methods in the later centuries, using peat turf for the kilns was no longer necessary, and it became a matter of flavour preference enjoyed by a select few distilleries. Well, as far as whisky goes, what does peaty mean? So we know what peat is now and how it came to be a part of the whisky world, but what does it mean when a dram is described as peaty? Well, the most obvious answer is that the whisky tastes smoke, not in a cigarette way necessarily, but in the warming, sitting before a smouldering fire on a winter's eve way. But peat varies from region to region. depending on the flora and geology native to the area that it grew in. And this terroir imbues peat in different regions with a subtle distinction in flavour. For example, peat sourced from Islay is often noted as being saline or briny due to the proximity and inclusion of sea air and salt water in the region seeping into the peat bogs. On the other hand, peat bogs from the Highlands are often formed with other plant life, such as trees in the near vicinity, which brings herbal or woody notes. And Orkney, in particular, is noticed for its floral-laden peat, which is produced due to the abundance of heather in Orkney. And the source of the peat does matter. The location of the peat source can change the character of the whisky, and this is often referred to as peat terroir. Just like wine, the place where the peat comes from can influence the end product. So we've got Aberdeenshire peat. Ardmore, which we're going to taste in a moment, sources its peat from Aberdeenshire peat from St Fergus. The Northern Peat and Moss Company own over 1,000 acres of peatland in Aberdeenshire, only 250 acres of which are actively worked, with the rest being given over entirely to nature. That business is now in its fourth generation and run by Russell Gall, who continues to produce peat for fuel and the Scottish whisky industry. And a lot of whisky distilled uses peated malt that's been peated with their peat, both in Scotland and around the globe. And this peat is used in the malting process, contributing to the unique flavour profile of Ardmore's single malt whisky. The distillery's commitment to using local peat ensures that each whisky reflects the rich heritage of that part of the Scottish Highlands. It's generally made from heather and wood, and Aberdeenshire peat tends to impart a sweeter, floral and less overpowering smoky profile. We do also have Highland peat itself, which tends not to be as salty as peat from Islay. It's intensely earthy and rich. Springbank source their peat just south of Inverness. But because most of it is found inland, it tends not to have salted qualities. It is made up of more plant-based matter with lots of heather and thick earth in it, and this imparts a rich earthy note. Then there's Orkney peat. Highland Park is the only distillery in the world to use Orkney heathered peat, and they source their peat from an area of Hobbarster Moor, just down the road from the distillery. And over millennia, the Orkney peat has been infused with heather, which imparts a distinct floral character to the smoke used in Highland Park's production process. And it imparts floral, heathery notes to the whisky. It's used to smoke their barley, which delivers complex floral aromas in their kilns. And that's what creates a unique and satisfyingly subtle hint of aromatic smoke that you can find in every bottle of Highland Park Single Malt Scotch Whisky. And then, of course, there's Islay peat, which is often made of sphagnum moss and seaweed. And Islay peat is soaked in brine, seaweed, mosses and maritime vegetation, giving rise to drams with salty tang, medicinal iodine and sea spray smoke. And then there's the level of peat. Scientists measure peat intensity using ppm, pheno parts per million, a laboratory analysis determining how many smoke-derived phenolic compounds have adhered to the barley during kilning. Whilst this measurement occurs before distillation, it provides a reliable guide to the smokiness you'll experience in your glass. And the levels of peat can go from unpeated, 0 to 1 parts per million. Most Speyside whiskies like Glenfiddich and the Macallan fall here, showcasing fruit, vanilla and honey notes without smoky interference. Bunnahabhain from Islay surprisingly belongs in this category too, mostly, unless they're doing a peated run, proving that not all Ireland or Islay whiskies are smoke bombs. And then there's lightly peated, 1 to 10 parts per million. Springbank, approximately 8 parts per million, exemplifies this subtle approach, with just enough smoke to add complexity without dominating other flavours. These whiskies offer an excellent entry point for peat newcomers. And then there's medium peated, 10 to 20 parts per million. Highland Park, approximately 20 parts per million, although when it goes in the bottle, it's down to about 8 parts per million. And over time in the cask, probably goes down to 2 parts per million. But it sits comfortably here in the medium peated bracket, presenting a balanced profile where heathery smoke weaves through honey and orange notes. And Bowmore, despite hailing from Islay, also occupies this middle ground. Then there's heavily peated, 20 plus parts per million, and this is where Islay truly dominates. Laphroaig and Lagavulin, 34 to 40 parts per million, deliver medicinal maritime intensity, while Ardbeg pushes beyond 50 parts per million. Octave series from Berwickladdy has reached an astonishing 300 plus parts per million, creating some of Scotland's most intensely smoky drams. Regionally, Islay remains synonymous with heavy peat, while Speyside and lowland distilleries typically produce unpeated expressions. The islands and highlands tend toward light to medium peat levels, with notable exceptions in both directions. So Bunnahabhain is practically unpeated in its core expressions. Springbank, approximately 8 parts per million. Ardmore, 12 to 14 parts per million. Highland Park, 20 parts per million. Bowmore, 20 parts per million. Talisker, 25 parts per million. The Jaig, 35 parts per million. Lagavulin, 35 to 40 parts per million. Laphroaig, 40 parts per million. Port Charlotte, 40 parts per million. Ardbeg, 50 parts per million. Long Row, Springbank's peated malt, 55 parts per million. And Octave, 80 to 300 plus parts per million. So we're going to start tonight with a Ardmore, and this is a Cadenhead original collection Ardmore at 14-year-old, fully Bourbon barrel matured. So, Ardmore. Well, this remarkable Highland distillery boasts a deep-rooted history and produces a malt that evolves beautifully over time. The luscious fruit notes may not reveal themselves until the second decade, while the earlier years showcase a harmonious blend of the well-rounded peat character and the influence of the cask. And for those looking to transition from unpeated whiskies to the ruthless peated varieties of Scotland, Ardmore is always my top recommendation as a great conduit. On the nose, the new make is wood smoke and lightly oily, with a light grassy note behind. Time you get apple skin, lime, and a very light cereal. The palate is sweet and smoky, and it has a positive weight and oiliness, with a touch of citrus and dried flower giving it lift. It's a complex new make with many avenues of potential approach, and the finish is clean with light smoke. So let's see what we have here. 46%, this one is 46%. Sorry, I got that wrong. This one is actually 56.5%. And it's from the original collection, 14-year-old, 56.5% bourbon barrel. So This is from the March 2025 Authentic collection. And it's got nice tiers, a nice tide line. And it opens with a distinctly Ardmore farmyard character. I'm getting hay bales, brine, sardines and cold butter. And there's a light smokiness, reminiscent of a cigarette or cigar smoke, but it's subtle. And as this opens up, I'm getting sweeter notes like candy floss, caramel, apple strudel, and butterscotch with salt and a hint of lemon peel. It noses a little older than it actually is, but it's very soft peat, fresh honey, apple strudel and cinnamon. Soft, delicate peat with the earthiness lingering, caramel, vanilla and toffee. Sultanas, and you know, when you were young, you had Scalextrics perhaps, and the engines would overheat. It's a bit like that kind of smell. Scalextrics, overused Scalextric engine. Oat cakes, light honey, dried apple slices, and a clean saltiness. That's a raw smoke, barley, smoky orange, smoky porridge rather, and the wet gravel again, soup. I'm not getting a huge amount of fruit on this one. Maybe lime, lemon drizzle cake, basil, and a good olive oil. Warm honey and a distant bonfire smoke. It's austere, but exceptionally well defined. Try them out. And it's very sweet initially with limoncello, vanilla ice cream, whipped cream, butter and lemonade. It coats the mouth well and has an oily and coastal quality. There's plenty of earthy peat here, along with oysters and more of that briny character from the nose. It's a coastal type peat, lemon, citrus, shortbread. And the peat does come through, and it's quite prolonged throughout the whole experience. There's caramelised bananas, black peppercorns, beefy bits, and a hint of dry bread and hot dogs in brine. And it's got a pleasing texture. There's a nice mentholated smokiness poured onto green apples and not too ripe peaches. There's a slight bitterness, small cider apples, pine needles, earthy peat, lemon zest, seashells, some fresh mint, and crispy baked kale with sea salt. And the finish is a menthol, mint, applewood smoke, sea salt. It's quite long, with ashes and shy tin fruits. So lemon juice on oysters with some smoked cheese in the finish. some white pepper in the aftertaste. And the oak starts to argue with that, and some pepper spice. And it's a sort of medium to long finish. I'm going to add a mill of water to this. It's got lovely viscimity. And it's even more austere with water. More on smoked porridge, soaked stone dust, ashes, and it's like a 4 o'clock. It's a bit spicier and hotter with water. There's less sweetness and no notes of pickled ginger and orange peel appear. There's more farmyard funk now, but there's very little smoke to speak of when you add water. Try the mouth. And there's a few fruits now. Green bananas, white peaches again and again, and a little barley sugar. It becomes honeyed with water. Though oddly, also becomes even more spicy on through the mid palate. And the finish gives you more smoke and oak. There's a strong grapefruit note appears. It turns a little bitter and lingers on the finish alongside a touch of dark chocolate. The spice seizes off a bit on the finish, which remains a good length. So for this one, a finish wasn't necessary, and after tasting this, it's clear why. This is a quintessential example of Ardmore, aged in bourbon casks. I think it's an excellent whisky and a journey worth taking if you're seeking a peated whisky that exudes sophistication. It's one to think about seriously. I love this Die-Hard style. It's perhaps not just for everyone though. I think if you wanted to showcase Ardmore as a spirit to rival what's coming off of Islay though, you couldn't go wrong with this. It's lovely coastal, smoky and citric notes combining. If you told people this was Ardbeg, they'd believe you and then bite your hand off for charging £70 for it. On the nose, superb. On the mouth, really beautiful. And the finish is nice. I'm going to cleanse my palate tonight. Going down marketing to walk with Smith's bacon fries. Bacon flavoured fries. So next we're going all the way up to Orkney, And I have recently discovered Decadent Drams, an indie bottler, who do some interesting whiskey. And this one is Whiskyland. They've got different names: Whiskey Sponge, Whiskyland. This one is Whiskyland Chapter 16, Highland Park. 20-year-old at 55.5%. And they do some interesting things with casks. There's many ways to Whiskyland, but like these two befuddled Vikings that appear on the bottle, most people have to first get lost in order to find their way to Whiskyland. And Whiskyland Chapter 16 is a marriage of a 2005 first fill sherry hogshead of Highland Park with a 1997 refill hogshead of Highland Park. And the resulting 20-year-old whisky, bottled at natural marrying strength, is a multi-vintage take on classical mature Highland Park with a subtle drenching of cherry. So let's flash up our sails for a storm, christen all our weapons with names like Ball Squelcher, Skullmonger and Thyroid Disruptor, grab a few nosing horns and pray for our preferred assortment of imaginary gods that you wash ashore on one of the stretches of Whiskyland coastline that is well served by hostelry and at least 3-star accommodation. These are their words, not mine. So, Highland Park. The new maker's smoke and citrus on the nose. It's very lifted and sweet, with fresh kumquat peel and bright juicy fruit. The palate has lightened up with a big spread of sweet citrus and then fragrant smoke. And the finish continues to sweeten with a touch of peat. So let's see what this one turns out like. And you can see it's a little darker than the first one because of the sherry influence. These are all non-chill filtered natural colour. And it's got a thin tide line, but nice viscousy tears. And on the nose, there's hints of damp oak, dunnage flower, and waxy lemons. And you get slivers of charcoal and honeyed floral notes. And that earthy peat smoke is present but subdued. But there's also a syrupy, sherried element alongside soft, farmy notes. It's good stuff, and it becomes more savoury as time goes on. It's dry on sponges, chalk, wool, cloth, seawater, asparagus and bamboo shoots. And then it's very citric as well. Try the mouth. And it's a dry, earthy peat with a good amount of soot and light notes of licorice. It's a touch of honey and soy sauce, as well as stroop waffles, fennel and camphor, hints of tobacco. There's soft herbal notes and dates too. It's very tight, very waxy, very lemony. It's like a lemon scented candle burning on a beach. And there's a whisper of teak and a pinch of pepper. And the finish is medium to long. Sandalwood, burlap, and hints of mushrooms, and asphalt as well. I'm going to try a mill of water in this. A nice symmetry again. And it's like crushed slate and oyster shells, which are excellent to keep the snails and slugs off your plants. Try them out. And water does soften this. I think I prefer it on the mouth with water. And green banana and a sort of fatty, salty seafood. Clams, for example, or scallops. Yeah, sauteed scallops with noix de pois. And the finish is long and rather fat, salty, chalky, with a little plasticine, lemon and citron liqueur, and cordial in the aftertaste. What's not to like about this? Scottish malt whisky at its finest, distinctively old school, yet distilled, partly at least, in this century. If that's not reassuring, I don't know what is. I'm going to have another cleanse them apart with my bacon fries. So the third whisky I'm going to try tonight comes from Living Souls, and they're a fairly new indie bottler, and worth checking out. I've tasted a few of theirs, I've done a few reviews. This is a Living Souls Torabhaigh 7-year-old, 51.6%, and Torabhaigh is the first whisky distillery built on Skye in 190 years, and only the second legal site to operate on there. And the site of Torabhaigh was actually chosen by Sir Ian Noble, who founded Prabhan Nanlind in 1976, but sadly he passed in 2010 before he could see his plan through. Mossburn distillers took advantage of the established planning permission, and in 2014 began the process of turning the 200-year-old farmstead into a distillery. The brand sources all its barley from Scotland and predominantly does peated runs at 75 ppm or above. That's mixed with pure Island spring water sourced from the Alt Brichach and Alt Glen burns in a 1.5 ton mash tun before long fermentation of at least 70 hours, going up to 120 hours. That occurs in 8 1,000 litre capacity Douglas fir wooden washbacks. Distillation takes place in two traditional copper pot stills, custom made by Forsyths of Rothes, an 8,000 litre wash still and a 5,000 litre spirit still. More than 50% of Torabhaigh whisky is aged in first fill bourbon cask, but the brand also has port, Madeira, cognac, sauternes, Bordeaux wine, virgin European oak, and refill cask in its warehouses, which includes a spread of dunnage, racked, and palletised warehousing. Production is overseen by 9 distillers and first took place in January 2017. It was in February 2021 that they released its first whisky, the Legacy Series 2017. And they'll release a further 3 expressions in the series until 2028, when a single malt that has been aged for 10 years is ready. It may be a fairly new player on the whisky scene, but that doesn't mean the whisky lacks flavour. It serves big, bold flavours, think brine, tar, salty peat with balanced sweetness and plenty of smoke, usually 75 parts per million or more. Although saying that, the peat is more polished, well tempered, as they would put it. Their vision was to create a layered, complex smokiness rather than an overpowering and medicinal one. And they pay close attention to the 2 phenolic compounds, cresol and glycol, to find the desired balance with the smoke character. Cresol usually adds medicinal and tarry notes, while glycol brings in sweeter smoke and earthiness. The higher cut point reduces the heavier cresols, and charred American oak contributes to the glycol. Of course, it's slightly more complicated than that, but we'll have another look at it at some point in the future. The new make of Torabhaigh has cereal sweetness and notes of strawberry jam and dark cherries, and it's very nice. Most of their spirit maturing in ex-bourbon barrels, but they have experimented with various sherry casks. This release is a bold single malt from Torabhaigh on the Islay, matured in first fill bourbon barrels. And it's brought to us by Living Souls. So 7 years in bourbon barrels, Torabhaigh. And again, it's a sample, this one from the Spirits Embassy, and it's bottled at 51.5%. They've changed the way they do these, and they're getting more and more difficult to get the little thing off. But there we go, I've got it. $3CL sample. Very clear, lightly coloured. And you can see, even just pouring it from a salad bottle, there's some bubbles there, which tends to indicate non-chill filtration and higher ABV. And it's got quite a thin tide line. Nice tears. And one thing I have noticed about Torabhaigh, I've tasted a couple, is it nose is very crystalline. Slightly citrusy. Almonds, and there's a sort of mild sourdough. Mild and fruity pineapple aromas. There's sort of light gypsum and gravel aromas. There's a sweetness of vanilla honey and barley sugar, and a touch of iodine. It's really nice. And the word crystalline springs to mind here every time. It's pure seawater blended with lime juice, Granny Smith juice, a small tincture of iodine, and the waters of a dozen oysters. Try the mouth. Lovely tears on this now. Lovely tide line on this now. And it's a late summer barbecue by a misty Scottish loch with a scent of smoked ham. Glad I got the bacon fries. Hangs in the cool air, and laughter echoes off the hills. There's flavours of burnt, sticky marshmallows and roasted almonds in the air. And that all creates a sweet and savoury contrast that lingers. And the initial taste is almost like a joke because it's so mild and soft. In a blind tasting, I would guess 42 rather than 51.5. But then you get the fruity, dry, and slightly mineral elements unfolding. Hint of ginger. This is the opposite of the adjective intrusive. It's like a good Pinot Grigio or Riesling. And it leaves a similar smell to that in an empty wine glass, full of brine, seawater, chili, but not hot chili, and ashes. It's ultra vertical and a shop full of ashes of all kinds. Mouthfeel is subtly salty and slightly almost waxy for its age. It's a very good distillate, and the finish is summery, long and pure, salty and lemony. And the Granny Smith apples are back in the aftertaste. I'm going to add a mill of water to this. And I can see as it went in, the symmetry is astonishing. And there's some Scotch mist appearing there already. Wonderful stuff. And the nose is now pleasant peat smoke, combined with vanilla, pears, and sea salt. And you get sort of hot fat and glowing charcoal, but you also get burlap, plasters, and bandages. And in the background, there's quite sweet citrus fruits, including grapefruit and blood orange, and a few walnuts. And there's some fairly tight notes, peppered clams, winkles, whelks, and cockles. And it's like a good glass of petrol-y Alsatian Riesling. I'll try the mouth. And it's incredibly soft and creamy. Peat smoke and alcohol are perfectly integrated. Iodine, soot, and a touch of tar alongside that sweet vanilla, and a touch of caramel and lemon peel and gooseberries. And the sunflower seeds are just in the back, a faint hint of cold green tea, dazzling lemons, and smoked and salted almonds. the finish is very long, building up a bit of spice, and aromas of well-aged ham emerge, and you get wood smoke, soot, and pepper, and the taste of the smoked ham lingers long in the memory. This is a dram made for long evenings, full of flavour and lively conversations. As with Torabhaigh, always no frills, just high quality. Its big brother on the other sky, Talisker, now handles things differently and, if necessary, uses a lot of colouring and strong port wine finishing. This bottling is comparatively old for Torabhaigh. There's an age indication of at least 7 years. It's a very delicate whisky with an incredibly smooth palate for over 50% alcohol. It's pure and crystalline indeed. I'm just going to cleanse my palate again with some more of these flowers. So we're moving over to Islay now. Last 2 drams. So first up, we have a rare find Islay medium peated. Rare find Islay, 11-year-old medium peated, cask number 65, 55.8%. So rare find. Well, Ardmore is an independent bottler based in Edinburgh, and it's founded in the 2010s, and it releases single cask and small batch whiskies under ranges such as a rare find, and they focus on natural presentation, typically without chill filtration or added colouring. It's also bottled other spirits including gin and rum, expanding its role within the independent sector. But this one is whisky from Islay, medium peated, and it was distilled in the 8th of April 2013, and it was matured in first fill European Union Oloroso hogshead, broken down from a butt, that had 20-year use with Bodegas Fundador 15-month finish, and there's 357 bottles, so quite a lot to take in there. But essentially, this is medium peated Islay whisky from an unnamed distillery, which is Bourbon. So, what have we got here? So Bourbon, about 20 parts per million. It's got a thin tide line, but quite nice tears. And it's got bold fragrances of candle smoke, coastal peat, and that Parma violets that we get from pure Bourbon. But it's been gently rounded off by dry sherry, which evokes an impression of high quality boot polish. And there's a nice addition of maritime touches, shells, oysters, and there's hints of aged tools and antique bronze. It's not entirely typical, but it's undeniably charming. And it's got a dry PX-like character reminiscent of dry Malaga. Try them off. Nice tears in this now. And the mouth brings dark chocolate, coffee, seaweed, bacon salad, and a sort of sweet balsamic glaze. And it's ever so slightly soapy, with guavas, yellow fruits, and it's got a touch of an aquarium about it. Walnut liqueur, mustard, salt, seawater, shoe polish. Peppery and a stray raisin or two, which brings to mind the old darkest Bourbon, only it's 1,000 times better balanced. Maybe 10,000 times better balanced than that. It's good, but it could be excellent given a few more years, just to let the fruits shine through. And the finish it's complex. It's a sweet smoky finish. It's long, predominantly saline, with a late flourish of dark chocolate. I'm going to add a mill of water to this. And you get the sort of candle smoke again, the Parma violet, dark chocolate, coffee, seaweed, bacon and balsamic. But you also get gamey notes emerging, along with motor oil, plasticine, hand cream and lip balm. I'll try them out. And you get dark chocolate, coffee, seaweed, smoky bacon, and that sweet balsamic glaze. And the finish is sweet and smoky, lingering. It's long, just a tad oilier, and even lightly liqueur-like with a peppery edge. So this is almost certainly Bowmore, and this bottling offers a delightful balance, blending classic Islay peat with the rich, sweet influence of Oloroso sherry, making it more complex and less overwhelmingly smoky than some other Islay malts, with a beautiful interplay of sweet and savoury notes. It's a well regarded release for fans of nuanced characterful Islay whiskey. I'm going to cleanse my palate one last time here. So for our second Islay and final dram of this tasting, we have a Duncan Taylor, the Octave, an Islay, 2008, 16-year-old, cask number 11844946, bottled at 53.7%. So this was distilled in 2008 and matured for 16 years in oak cask, and then was finished for 6 months in a sherry Octave, Oloroso Octave. So it's from an undisclosed Islay distillery, and the bottlers Duncan Taylor won't tell you what it is. Bottled in 2025, and there were 97 bottles of this. So, guess the whiskey. Well, let's nose taste and see where we go with this. So it's got a nice coppery colour. 6 months in Oloroso, so that'll be a second full Octave. Let's see. It's got a thin tide line, but nice tears. 53.7%. And it's got honey, maple syrup, milk chocolate, dried fruits, goji berry. And there's a subtle wood varnish. Honey, citrus, fudge and vanilla with air. There's some burnt wax and seaweed thins. Pebbles covered in seawater. It's a sort of light caramelised sweetness. And it's fairly fruit forward rather than coastal. There's orange, mango, passion fruit and strawberry gummies. And there's a little turmeric in the background. And the peat shows as gentle wood char and an extinguished log fire that slowly appears with time. It's some vanilla essence and limoncello. And even at 53.7%, the alcohol spice is minimal. Try them out. This is honey-laden arrival, and citrus builds through the mid-palate. It's rich, syrupy, dark fruit liqueurs. There's dark chocolate, walnuts, espresso, raisins, and spicy peppers, sweet roots, gentian, and a sort of honeyed citrus. It's potent and unmistakably Islay, but it's soft and saline up front. And it's slightly sweet and seaweedy mid-palate. There's just vague traces of tart citrus and olive. And then you get lots of rock salt with a breathy smoke. Mouth feels possibly just a little thin for the strength. You get brown sugar, lemon curd and vanilla. But just like the nose, the peat is restrained. And it's a sort of bitter finish, herbal, dark fruit, earthy, spicy, hints of dark tobacco, black olive, ashy peat, with a medium finish. And that sort of cracked black paper appears, but the alcohol remains well balanced. I'm going to try and mirror the water in this. And water brings a hint of warehouse funk, creme brulee, and a stronger hit of citrus. The alcohol spice and peat remain subtle, with fudge and a little chocolate emerging if you give it a little patience. Try them out. And there's more umami, like beef stock, florals, brighter citrus, and a gentler spice, ginger, and enhanced dark chocolate. With water, it's more relaxed, and there's a touch more complexity to it too. It's sweeter, and some of the briny samphire char notes come through a bit more. There's still some of that fudge and creme brulee on the palate. The citrus has receded somewhat, and the peat is also lighter, and the mouthfeel is probably a touch better with water. And the finish is like a seaweed broth. Spice is heading to the ginger variety, and it's joined by some dark chocolate on the medium finish. You know, this is pretty simplistic stuff, but it's very enjoyable. It's very distillate driven, despite the Octave and 16 years in cask. For me, I think it comes across as a cool either. I've seen people suggest Lagavulin, which is believable, but it's not like the official bottlings of Lagavulin, if that's the case. Maybe the official 8-year-old would be the closest comparator. But there's some nice aromas and flavours. I think the cask possibly has covered some of what I personally enjoy about the base spirit of Islay peated malts. If you don't go in looking for classic Islay or sherry malt, there's a lot to enjoy with this whisky. I think it would be a nice whisky to give to someone wanting a gentle introduction to Islay peat. So, of the whiskies tasted tonight, I think I've developed a partial liking for Ardmore in the last few months. Its smokiness is different from almost anything else. It's woodier and more heathery than Islay. Highland Park is a singular malt, and I always have a soft spot for its more aged, sherry matured bottles. And Torabhaigh is one of my new go-to island drams, along with Le Jake. Bowmore from independent bottlers, I always think is better for me than official bottlings. Although I noticed last year I rated the 15, the 18, and the 25 very well. Octaves can be a bit hit and miss for me. I find the accelerated wood contact can overpowers some distillates. But in this case, it didn't. It was perfectly okay. So that's it. That's my week of Peat for 2026. Thanks for listening.